1. I'm a 27-year-old male. I grew up and live in a fairly small town in the middle of Germany. My parents bought their dream house in 1996, a year after I was born, and moved into it in 97. Everything was fine until the late 2000s, sometime around 2007 or 2008, when a salesman for a German grocery store chain knocked on the door, offering to buy every house in the street because said grocery chain wanted to expand and build a new store in town. This started to lead to an up and down for the next, technically, 10 years until my father passed away, and we were forced to sell the house to the company for far less than expected, since my dad ended up making a huge debt to my mother and my name. We forgive him and moved on. He was mentally ill. My mother told me today, less than 3 hours ago, that the bureaucracy is finally done, and that the store is going to demolish every house on the street by the beginning of the month. While we talked, she told me about wanting to place a rose down into our old house before it gets demolished. And silly me always kept one spare key because you never know if you would ever need it again. Anyways, the store or company never replaced the locks, and I was able to get back into it for the first time in 5 years to make sure that we could place the rose down. So while I was inside, it felt like coming home. But suddenly I felt a cold breeze after a moment, and smelled the scent of mothballs like someone would walk past me, smelling like them. I didn't think much about it at the time, but when I ended up walking out to the back, into the small courtyard, I ended up standing in the middle of a free area. Something suddenly touched and pressed into my shoulder while I wasn't able to move and breathe for like a second. I was physically not able to do so while I had the feeling I was being watched from the second I entered the house until I walked out. The scent of the mothballs also followed me the whole time I was in there. Or, better, while I was on our old ground. I remembered my mother telling me about smelling mothballs in the house back in the day from time to time, as well as feeling a cold breeze in a closed room. And after calling her and talking to her, she mentioned that she believed that there lives a ghost in our house, which is the main reason why she wants to put a rose down. If it helps, the house is from the 1600s, 1628 as far as I know, burned partially down in the 1700s and got rebuilt. We highly believe that there used to be a connection to the church up the hill, but we were never able to actually prove the theory, though we've seen the original plans from the 1600s, showing a pair of stairs leading down where our back-then living room used to be. So yeah, my question is, did I encounter a spirit, and if so, was or is it a good or bad one? Why did it touch me, but never my mother or anyone else? Did it recognize me after not being there for 5 years? And, well, can someone explain to me what happened to me in there? 2. Hello. This is a bit of an odd story. Let me start off by getting a few things out of the way. My girlfriend is very unique. We've been dating for almost 5 months. And before she and I got together, I never saw any type of shadow people or anything really supernatural. I have never even seen the fabled Hat Man that so many other people claim to see. Well, after we got together, things got a little weird. This may sound a little fucked up, but before her, I never really cared much for other people. I never really felt any sympathy or care for anyone. But that only applies to other people. I've always felt compassion and had a love for animals, but never any other people until after I met my girlfriend. Not only that, but the amount of weird things that have happened, let's call them incidents. The number of incidents we've had in the past 5 months has been quite ridiculous. Let me list a few examples. If we're out and about and we both see someone fall over, we will both say the exact same thing, at the exact same time, in the exact same way. Almost in a machine-like robotic manner. It's very odd. We finish each other's sentences all the time, and we both just seem to know when something is wrong with the other. Not just in person, but over text as well. I've also noticed that whenever we're together, I always see 2 crows. Every time we go out to eat, go to the mall, or go outside to smoke, there is always 2 crows. And when I'm not with her, I only ever see 1 crow. Now, I need to get something else out of the way. My girlfriend has a personality disorder. It's not super severe, but it's there. This is important for the story I'm about to tell. One day I fell asleep in her chest while she was rubbing her hands through my hair, I started dozing off and then realized I was falling asleep and I wanted to have a lucid dream. And the last thing I remember before falling asleep was just thinking my girlfriend's name in my head. Now onto the dream itself. A golden light slowly approached me from the darkness and enveloped my entire body. I blinked and I was sitting at my desk in my room. I was on a FaceTime call with her and she tells me, "Babe, watch out behind you." And I look down at my phone and in the window where I can see myself, I see me and the jet black female figure standing right behind me. When I laid eyes on this figure, I was filled with the most gut-wrenching anxiety and fear. I could feel nothing but misery and malevolence radiating from this figure. I don't think in my 18 years of life that I have ever felt malice or horror like I felt in this dream. After I saw it, I tried spinning around to confront it, and I fell out of my chair. As I fell, everything was ripped away from me, similar to how it had enveloped me, but about 10 times as fast. At this point, everything around me was pitch black, and I could still feel the anxiety and fear, but to a far lesser degree. I thought I was dead. I started thrashing around as hard as I could, and then I woke up with adrenaline and horror. My girlfriend was obviously freaked out, and I recounted the events above to her. She then told me that the golden light was significant to one of her personalities, and that the shadowy figure was also significant. I should also note that I've only been asleep for about 30 minutes at this point. After talking things out with her, we came to the conclusion that I had peered inside of her head, and her hands were the connection point. But I have almost zero experience or knowledge when it comes to the supernatural implications of dreams, so take what I said there very lightly. This happened about a month ago, January 6th, 2023. The next 2 incidents happened back to back, one day after another. I'll start with Friday, February 3rd, 2023. We were coming home on the city bus and I snatched her a balloon from one of the bus stops. We ended up getting home and I tied the balloon to the chair at my desk, same one I fell out of in the dream, and then lay down in my bed with my girlfriend. After a while, I opened my eyes and saw a black thing come into the corner of my eye. It filled me with adrenaline and horror, yet again, and when I did a double take, it was just the balloon. But when it happened, it didn't feel like it was the balloon. What I saw was black and the balloon was red. Not only that, but the balloon was far enough away from my bed that from that angle, I was looking up at the ceiling, I wouldn't have been able to see the balloon in my peripherals. The black thing I saw came almost directly over the top of me. Now for February 4th, 2022, yesterday as of writing. I was in my backyard smoking. It was probably around 11 or 12 at night, and I felt like I was being watched from behind. It was almost like the anxious feeling I had, but not nearly as bad. After a minute or so, my dog comes out through the doggy door, and almost immediately the feeling went away. Normally, I would brush all of these encounters off as me being a schizo stoner, that's a joke. But the thing that's making me write this out tonight is that when my dog came outside, he was staring into the direction I felt I was being watched from when his ears perked up. Not only that, but the incident in January happened right around a full moon. And now these incidents are happening right around a full moon. If anyone could help me at all with any information or any similar experiences, please do. I'm kind of freaking out right now. I didn't realize the thing about the full moons until I'm at the very end of this post. And it's scaring me a little. 3. The first experience I had here happened a few months after I moved. I shared a room with my sister in the basement due to space issues. I was alone playing with my LPS toys when I felt a breath at the back of my neck. I thought it was my dog, and turned around, but there was nothing there. I turned back around to ignore it and continued playing for 5 seconds, but then fight, flight, freeze kicked in. I froze for a while, then got the feeling to run, so I ran upstairs to the living room. A month later, I was cleaning up the dog toys downstairs and saw a face staring at me. So I ran upstairs, and for some reason my mind decided to run back down to where it was and try to fight it, but it disappeared. I finally moved upstairs. Things quieted down, and I was glad to be out of that room. It was not over yet. From 3 to 6-ish, I heard a wailing sound moving through my house. At sometimes it sounded far away, at others it sounded right outside my door. I lay in my bed in fear until I grew annoyed by this and marched out of bed, and when I heard it again I opened my door. It stopped immediately and felt like a pressure was relieved. I later asked my sibling if they heard anything, and they said yes, for it kept them up too. About a year later, for an unknown reason, I started to feel unsafe around my bathroom mirror and started having dreams about it. But it stopped when I covered the mirror in my room. The blanket still lies over the top of the mirror and has not been removed since it's been put on. Aside from the sporadic disembodied parts I'd see from the side of my eye, things stopped. Until recently. I used to be able to do anything in my dreams. Scary things were cartoons. I knew how scary they were supposed to be, but never saw them like that. From reading to straight up asking for specific dreams while dreaming, to blood coating my fingers and head, and waking up with my lip bleeding. More dreams about my life, and darker themes in each dream occurring along with ominous things right before I wake up. I've read a contract saying, "You will be lost to the Mexican Ocean. They will strangle you, no one will hear you scream," with the latter being whispered into my ear during my waking moments. I've gotten rules like if you see a mirror where it shouldn't be, run. At the other end of my hall was a new glass shelf that could easily be mistook for a mirror, but I don't think that everything that could possibly be here is malicious, as I've woken up too. When you wake up and you exit your room, don't go to the room in your left. That room was the washroom I mentioned earlier, but I still went because I almost... I think there may be spirits in my house. But I don't think they're all malicious. This might just be an excuse, as I often do find myself making excuses for others, but I saw a younger face by my closed door watching me while I stayed up on my phone, but didn't feel any sort of danger, so I kinda ignored it. Even so, I don't want to go to bed and wake up terrified, or whatever may happen. What do I do? 4. Since I was a kid, you could call me different. I had this aunt, the sister of my mom, who you could say was gifted. Years later, she got diagnosed as a schizophrenic, although I think that's just the term they gave her because they couldn't explain what was going on with her. I was always really close to her, practically raised by her since my mom was working all day. Since I was little, she kept saying that because I was her favorite, I would inherit her gift. She could see the figures of people that never passed on the other side, left wandering around the world in an attempt to ease themselves. She told me that you can't see their faces, but only their shadows, although it has a set of rules going on when you encounter them for the sake of your sanity. Number 1, you never look straight at them for a long time. Number 2, you don't invite them in. Never. Number 3, they can't harm you, only scare you, unless you invite them in your home, and thus number 2. Number 4, if it goes too far, pray and everything will be fine. I never really believed her till I started to see shadows following me around, lurking around me, and from time to time, I would often see them in my dreams at my doorstep trying to come in. They were mostly friendly figures, but it didn't matter because you could always sense the evilness in their eyes. Then it got worse. I remember one night, I was casually playing in my computer, sample gamers of YouTube, and I heard footsteps and screaming from outside. Turn time was 3:03 at night. As I went on my balcony, figures started to project on the wall, people running with wagons, mostly crying, screaming, in a language I didn't know and never heard of. Little kids falling and being pressed to death by the feet of others, and torches in the air moving around. It was so loud it nearly bled my ears. I checked the other apartments, but no one was out, and the road in front of me was empty. You couldn't see anything for miles, but still the figures were moving, and the noise was deafening. For the first time in my life, I froze and felt that I couldn't move. Tears were streaming down my face, and I could barely see by the smell of the torches in the air. I closed my eyes and prayed, thus falling into the ground and hitting my ankle. Everything went silent, and I went back inside, trembling as the smell of the torch flattered my apartment, and I could see visible smoke in the air. None of my family members had awoken, though, or seemed to locate my presence, and I simply went and covered myself in my blanket, crying all night, till I fell asleep with the sun rising. The following morning, my grandma woke me up and informed me that it was my time to deliver the koliva and bread, spiritual food we cook for the dead in Greece. Because it was an All Souls Day and my uncles were waiting for me to deliver. She asked if I had turned the fireplace on because she smelled the fire, and that I shouldn't light it at night, because it might burn the house if unattended. 5. This happened about 10 years ago. I was a barely 20-year-old girl living in Massachusetts. I was driving to my college at the time. I commuted to school, and this particular day was very snowy, icy, and sleeting. I don't know why the school was in session, but in the Northeast they don't take bad weather very seriously. I think we've all seen the memes of cars with piles of snow on them saying they're heading to work. That's New England for you. So anyway, I'm driving to school and I was late. The road of which I was driving on was a 2-lane highway that was very steep. Between the 2 lanes were Jersey barriers, and the opposite flow of traffic was on the other side. Like many roads in Massachusetts, there are no shoulders, and there were no turnarounds. Once you were on this highway, you had to drive another 5 miles before you could pull off to the closest exit. It was a type of highway where if your car stopped, you were screwed because there's nowhere to pull off. Again, lack of shoulders and grass. Just concrete barriers on both sides, and a barrier in the middle. It's a dangerous highway that many people have died on. Even a friend of my mom's coworker died on it. I was driving pretty fast for the type of weather I was in. I was in the far left. I could see a tractor trailer in the far right, but behind my car. Suddenly, my car fishtailed, and I spun out completely. I was suddenly in the far right lane facing oncoming traffic. The tractor trailer was coming at me, like coming at me. There was no time or place to go. I remember the feeling came over me like my brain didn't register what was happening. And suddenly, out of nowhere, my car was in reverse, and I was in a miracle of a small shoulder, but still facing oncoming traffic. I don't know how it happened, but I remember being in shock how I did that. The tractor trailer blew by me in seconds. I mean, I was literal toast if I didn't get out of that shoulder, breathing heavily and saying to myself, did I really just do that? Within what must have been 10 to 15 seconds, I hear a few knocks on my driver window. I know it was about 10 to 15 seconds because I had the Britney Spears song Stronger on, and the car flipped at the bridge of the song. And the knock came at my window at the last chorus. I open the window and a young male police officer is now staring right at me. He then says, "Hey, I saw your car spin out." I see the lights behind now and his car parked right behind me in the same small squeeze of a shoulder that we had, that ended very quickly up ahead. Clearly seeing me in what probably looked like total shock, he continued on, "You were going too fast." "Yeah, I know." And then he says in this nearly soft but direct tone, "Stop rushing. When you're rushing, you need to relax, okay? Relax." It was something like that. He then says how he's going to stop traffic, that I can turn my car around in the proper direction and get back on the road. It's fuzzy how he did it, but I just remember him stopping the flow. I turned my car around out of the shoulder. Remember, my car was facing the wrong direction, so I wouldn't have been able to even turn the car around to get back on this icy, sleet, busy highway, and slowly pull it back into the proper direction I was supposed to be in. I continue on and look behind me. Normally you can see a cop pull out after you, see their lights on, or the car themselves, if they turn it off, etc. But all I saw were the cars that were waiting for me now driving. It's weird to explain, but this cop disappeared in seconds. I mean disappeared. Like I said, there was nowhere for this cop to go. The only turnaround the small cutout median cops tend to use to go in different directions wasn't for another mile ahead, and the first exit off wasn't for another 5 miles. The small little shoulder ended right where I was, and this cop was nowhere to be seen. It was so weird. I remember looking back several times in my mirror and saying, "Where did he go? What?" It was so odd I thought about it all day. I came home and told my parents what happened. Of course, in shock that my car spun out in the opposite direction, and I almost hit a tractor trailer, I told them exactly where this took place, how my car went into reverse in which I have no recollection of, and the magical cop that showed up in 10 seconds and disappeared as fast. My own parents thought it was the strangest thing. I've told this story to a few people I know, who have also called it very weird. I think, and my parents agreed, either that cop was sent by God at the exact moment I needed help, or he wasn't really a cop at all. It's been a decade, and I still think about this encounter. Without that man, I wouldn't have been able to get back on the highway, unless I took a risk or sat there in confusion and shock, with the possibility of someone hitting me while snow, ice, and sleet fell in my car. It was a very peculiar and life-saving encounter I won't forget. Hey everybody, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to Paranormal Stories, episode 315. And thank you very much to everybody who allowed me to use their stories in this video. Please do poke the like button before you go. It helps the video get noticed by other people, and then they'll watch it, and they'll recommend it to other people. Then profit, I think? Something like that. Anyway, if you could do that, that'd be great. Let's see. Okay, let's move right along to Hellfreezer's question of the day. And today's question is... And this comes thanks to a massive batch of questions from one of my subscribers, Donovan. Thank you very much for helping with the questions. And to everyone else who's made suggestions, it's appreciated. Okay, so let's see. Well, I'm slightly adapting these. Betamax or VHS, or V2000? Does anyone remember V2000? We all talk about Beta or VHS, but which did you have in your house? What was the preferred one in your household? I remember when I was a kid, there was always an old Betamax player that didn't work, and it was, I don't know why it was kept, but it was kept. I think I took it apart at one point and ended up getting tossed, just because I was bored. But we had upgraded to a VHS at one point, and I think we generally preferred the VHS. Beta was actually better in some ways, but overall, I think VHS was the superior format. So those of you who are old enough to remember, and if not, ask your parents. What kind of video player did you have? Beta, VHS, or the lesser-known V2000? And with that, I'm going to head off for now. Lots of recording to do. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourself.